Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast, where I'm joined by my wife, Olympic mental performance coach, Steffany Hanlon-Francie. In these episodes, Steffi and I have a conversation about the different aspects of what we refer to as Mindset Matters, because we believe that for those who are awake, we are living in and through the most impactful time in history. Your view of the world is the filter for how you will experience the evolution and changing dynamics of it. Our intention is to provide you with ideas, nutritious food for thought, and some tools that you can use to help you in being your greatest self and living your best life. Listen in, enjoy. So when it comes to change, we've come to realize that it is very hard, and then we need to investigate why that is. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast, Mindset Matters. Steffany.
Hey, hon.
We just came off an amazing weekend. We did our think tank weekend. We had such a great group of people, the privilege of working with some fantastic individuals and couples. And it was really great to open up the space that we have in our home to have people come into this environment, enjoy the space, the dogs, the horses, the cows, the great outdoors, and nice walks on a beautiful day. So it was a fantastic weekend, and all made better because of such a great group of people.
Well, it was such an honor because this was the inaugural think tank. We've done several across the country, but this one, when we committed to do it out of our home, I felt a little bit vulnerable. You know, we're going to be opening up our home and people seeing how we live and who we are and judging us. Are we the same on the podcast or as we are in real life? And, you know, how are we going to do it? How are we going to manage it? But I just wanted really acknowledge the people that supported us. Cheryl, oh my gosh, she was incredible. And Shar and you and everybody that kind of came together to make this happen. And when you had we have a group like that was so willing to do the work and dive in so fast. I mean, really, really fast. And the trust level that happened right off the start, I think it really gave everybody a lot of confidence to move forward into the what's next of their own lives.
Well, there has to be, number one, we talk about it often on the podcast, is that are you coachable? Because we're not coaxes, we're coaches. We put the program together called Clarity Equals Velocity. And when you start to get clarity, then you're actually, I don't want to say forced to, but you're left with few options but to make changes in your life. And, certainly over the course of the weekend and then right up to today when I had a great conversation with a client and really discussing the difficulty in change. So there is that quote that along the line is that until the pain of staying where you are or remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of the change, you will in fact stay the same. Being comfortable in the discomfort, even living with the pain. I mean, there's all sorts of stories and metaphors around that. And, the reality is that in order to change, it takes, number one, effort. Number two is that it's not like you flip a switch and then the next thing you know, you're where you want to be. There is that transitionary period. So when you commit to the change, then there's oh my gosh, I've got to execute, I got to take steps. And then you go through the discomfort of not knowing what you don't know. And you start to put things in place. And sometimes that takes weeks, months, even sometimes years of shifting who you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it, to come out the other side and go, oh, that was so worth it. And then there's part of it where you're hoping the hell it's worth it. What if it's not worth it or it doesn't feel like it is? And these are all things that we struggle with. And I don't know that that's always conscious when it comes to change. And that is, in fact, why people stay the same. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's like intentional change versus change because I have to, because I got a health diagnosis or someone died or I had an accident or an injury, and then I'm forced to change. And then that to me is very difficult. I would prefer to be intentionally and consciously moving my life forward and embrace change. I love change. Sometimes I don't even know I'm changing it, but my favorite line when something happens or I become aware is like, oh, here we grow again. because when you bump into that change or something that has to shift in your life, then to me, I just frame it as growth. And I think that's what I saw a lot over the think tank weekend, is that people not being as resistant to the possibility of having to do something different. I love the line, is that people seem to say all the time they want to change, but they don't want to have to change.
Yes. Of course. And those are the things that start to come to forefront when you actually embrace the work and start to reflect and really consider where you are, where it is that you want to go, and what has to be different in order for you to get to that outcome. Now, the thing about it is that, you made a really great point, is sometimes change is forced on us. So in other words, those health things that happen, or significant other says, I'm out of here, or some event, you get laid off, you get fired, business shuts down, whatever. All of a sudden you're forced into the cold of, oh my gosh, I got to change. And that is one of the, you have to do it. So then you're forced to do it, and you come out the other side. If you have the tenacity, if you will, and you have the AQ and the EQ, you see your way through it. But then there's that other work that we're talking about doing, is that, number one, don't wait for it to happen. Don't wait for you to be left with the feeling of, I don't have an option, I have to go this direction, or I have to do this, or a health scare put me in a position where I have to work out, or I have to do these things. The point is that when we look at what we've got going on in life, and then we start to self-reflect, self-examine, look at where we are compared to where we want to go, then we have to start making decisions. Now, I want to change, to your point that you just made, but I don't want to have to change. And of course, that doesn't work. And that's where the two things collide and where people get stuck. So they live in this world of maybe frustration, not feeling fulfilled, not feeling like they're have reached their full potential. It's not uncommon. You run into this with your clients, where you'll hear the comment, I know that I've destined for greatness, or I feel like I can be far more than I am today. I just don't know how to get there. I don't know how to make those shifts and that change. And that really is a summation of what happens, is people don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They're looking for an outside kind of answer, rather than doing the work and realizing that the answer is in them, in their decisions or lack thereof. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, the truth is, we already know, everyone knows what they have to need to do in order to have the life that they want. They just, in some ways, choose not to. And the choosing not to is committing to mediocrity or committing to stagnation, which I think right now is being supported more than change, more than growth. And if you look externally and how we're being kind of led, I think there's some resistance to change, because then, it's the tall poppy syndrome. When in Australia, they call it the tall poppy. The poppy grows high, and then the farmer comes and cuts it off to make it the same height as everybody else. But when you want to stand out, or you want to make a change in your life and you want to do something different, it can be done in small incremental steps. It doesn't have to be huge. The line I like to use is, think big, but act small. Like, take one small step in the direction that you want to go, make one small change. Look at what you can do, not what you can't do, or how to be familiar with the energy of change, because change has its own vibe. It has its own energy. And I really love the vibe. It means that we're moving and shaking, and we're alive, and it's more electric. And sometimes I see a lot of people that are very addicted to change, which is the extreme of that. And that's not healthy either. So I think it's coming to neutral and finding that when things are coming up and you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting the result you want, then what is it that you can do to look inside to make one small change, in the direction that you want to go? So think big, but act small.
One step at a time. Yeah. I was thinking recently, and it goes back because I've had a couple people say this to me, where they were actually making the statement that we have to get comfortable in the discomfort. So in other words, we live in this kind of TikTok world sometimes where it gets really comfortable, and we realize at some point that we have to get comfortable with the discomfort, because if you're not feeling some sense of discomfort, you're probably not growing. And if you're not growing, you're going backwards. Now, I preface that because I remember many years ago, early in our relationship, I think it was maybe when we just got married or just before we got married, we had made this statement along the lines of being comfortable in the discomfort. So in other words, being okay with change and being in the mindset of seeking change and always looking to elevate. And having said that, when I reflect back and all these years later, we've done that, but sometimes I wonder if it's more of a curse, because holy cow, sometimes it's difficult to go through that transitionary period to come out the other side, where you're being judged, you're being criticized, and or it's not working out quite the way you hoped it would, or you realize in hindsight that, oh gosh, that was maybe the wrong fork in the road and now I have to back up. All of these things can happen, but there also has to be the willingness to kind of be a little, I guess, philosophical and, embrace the term, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, and I'll know better the next time, and I'll work harder and do it differently next time and use it as a lesson to go forward. But if you don't adopt that idea, you're always looking and thinking that I can do this without ever failing and or taking the wrong step forward. And I guess we talked about that over Think Tank, and we've kind of touched on it many times, is that there are no mistakes. There's just results. And you either got the result you wanted and you can celebrate it or keep moving forward, or you got the result you didn't want, and so you put in the correction or kick the idea to the curb and go to another idea. But the point of it is that you have to really embrace the fact that in order to change, there's going to be a transitionary period that is going to be probably longer than you consider, more costly, because it's kind of like a renovation of a house, don't you think? It always costs you twice as much and takes 3 times as long. And I think that's kind of when we're renovating ourselves, that's part of the process too.
Well, I think too, as you talk, I'm thinking about, renovating yourself. I love that term. Did you just come up with that?
Yeah, because I'm thinking I'm under renovation. I've been under renovation for at least 45 years now.
Exactly. I know it's been a costly one. Anyway, I love it. But it means that you're taking responsibility. And that's what keeps coming up when I think about the word change, and shifting into a mindset where you can embrace change in a way that you can take responsibility and embrace the chaos that comes with the change. Because I think about moving, or you think about changing jobs or whatever, a lot of times we don't want to make those or take those decisions because it creates some chaos. And I know many people that won't make decisions or change because it creates that disruptiveness or that chaos in their lives. And then, or when they do it, they spend 2, 3, 5 years or weeks or months or whatever organizing their lives so that it feels the same as it used to. So they actually didn't really have to change how they do things. So there's an interesting process that happens if we open up to invite change, whether it's a move or a changing job or leaving a relationship or entering a relationship, and noticing the mindset that we're bringing into it. Are we bringing in the mindset that we had before, and we're just going to fight to make it the same, even though we're in a different city or a different job or in a different relationship? Have you ever heard the term that some people will change relationships, but they'll always end up with the same person?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, I think, with jobs or with other environments where you're not fully prepared to be in the discomfort or the unknown. And I love what the piece of change for me I love is the unknown. It means I get to create. It means there's no boundaries. It means there's no boxes. And I love that, but I know that I'm weird, in that regard. But if anyone that's listening to this if you've noticed that you've embraced the change, but you don't like the chaos and the discomfort of going through that eye of the needle, we call it, or that, that change zone, because who I have to become, or who you have to become to get to the other side, to be open to the possibility of what the change is bringing, means that you might have to live in boxes for a while. You have to maybe have your stuff in storage, or you may have to be single if you like being, in a relationship. There's things that aren't wrong. They just happen, and they're not happening to you. They're just happening.
So there's another part to this that was really great about Think Tank. And as much as we look at our own willingness to change, this weekend we had couples in the room, and the realization that as much as we're individuals, if we're in a marriage, a relationship, we've got kids, and the reality of it is that we have to be able to communicate together and kind of go together, row the boat in sync, if you will. And one of the things that we used to use, and we've used the analogy before, or the metaphor, is that, if you're rowing a boat and you've got two people in the boat, if you're both rowing, it all works great. And especially if you're in sync. Now, at times in relationship, somebody may be seemingly rowing the boat more than the other person, and that can still work. But if for an ongoing basis, somebody is rowing the boat and the other person quits rowing, what happens is you just go around in circles, you go nowhere. And so the whole idea and the concept about working as couples and clarity equals velocity within this particular program that we presented was aligning with your significant other as well. And then that actually plays out into how you communicate with your kids and how you align as a family. And that was really all about embracing the change that you want to make within your family unit, if you will. But it all starts with you as an individual and the changes that you need to make, and recognizing what your values are, and then having conversation to share with what your values are, and hearing what other members of the families, what their values are. And so that was really where the clarity comes in, so that we come together as a family unit, come together as a couple to align. And that's where the velocity gets increased, but it's having and the ability to have conversations about the discomfort or the decisions that we're making as a family, as a couple. And there is still that transitionary period that when you have the conversation up front, collectively, you start to go, okay, we're going to go through this together. We're making a conscious choice to do it. That to me is always better than being at the effect of something where, because something is happening, which is often the case in business, we get thrown curveballs, partners do stuff, customers do stuff. We have government shifts, we have lockdowns and pandemics, and in our case, in the case of business, that impacts. Not everybody's wired to be an entrepreneur. That's the other side of that equation. I mean, I think there's some people that are just great at being leaders on any given team, but they're not cut out to be business owners / entrepreneurs. So I don't know quite where I was going with that, other than I wanted to comment on the fact that as couples, we need to align as well, and so that we're embracing change together, so that we're not coming out sideways with our significant other. You want to add to that?
Well, we saw that this weekend, and I thought, how interesting it was to bring up these topics and then to have the time to just drill down and spend some time and some effort and some brain space chatting it out and figuring it out together. And, when do we give ourselves that time? Right now, life is so fast. And things are happening and coming at people, whether you have a job or you're an entrepreneur, or solopreneur, or CEO. Things are happening fast, and the shifts are happening very, very fast. And if we don't consciously and intentionally take some time and just carve out some space, even some of the feedback we got on the weekend is that even more time, not doing exercises, or more time out in nature doing maybe a walk and talk, or figuring things out together, and having more time out at the picnic table and just going through the exercises. Because of course, when you get home, you enter your life, the job, and you got the vacuum, and you got to wash the car, and kids got to go to school, and you got to make dinner and food prep. And then life just carries on. So having that time and space with yourself first, because that's what we said, this work has to be done individually. And because there were couples in the space, it was a really interesting dynamic. And I think that's something that you and I do really well, is that we do bring our unique individual selves, and then we battle through to figure out how we can align on what it is that we want to do. And I think with change, the familiarity that I have with being able to embrace change as an entrepreneur can give me the comfort when things do blow up or the yogurt does hit the fan, that I know there's going to be a cycle where it comes around where I'm supported. And that's the part that we didn't really talk about as much yet, is that not only do we need to be prepared and make some small steps, but do we have the support around us, people that have a vested interest in our success and in the lives, and not, just our cheerleaders, but people that really want us to win. And to me, that's a big, big addition to what we brought this weekend.
Well, I think there's a couple things around that you kind of hit on, and one of the things certainly is that we have a team around us that's going to support the change. But the other side of that is the more, I guess, the darker side, which is, when you start to change, the people around you start to say, well, hold it here. How's that impacting me? You're not, why are you changing? And what does that mean to me? And so there's relationships that come into there. And I know that is one of the things that people bump up against, because like attracts like. So if you are kind of doing what you've always done, the people that are around you are used to who you are and the way you're being and what you're doing and how that is and how it plays into your relationship and into their life. Well, when you change your dance step, then everybody else is out of sync, So if you're doing hip hop and then all of a sudden you change to waltz and everybody else is still doing hip hop, guess what? It really impacts them on the dance floor. So there's a lot of fear around that. What's this going to mean to my friends? What is this going to mean to my workmates? What is this going to mean to others? And I think that's a reasonable question to ask. But if you're coming from a place of what is best for you, what is best for your family, then yeah, you could have some fallout if there's those individuals that are so locked into staying the same or not going on the journey with you, or maybe not understanding that you need to make a shift in how you operate. And that's some of the other things that we talked about was operating system. What is your operating system? What are your belief systems? And, how we are wired. Our software is really downloaded early on in our life by parents and family and society. And we have to look at that software and we have to look at our operating system. And sometimes they both need upgraded, which means you got to look at that software and say, this software is really out of date. It's time to change it and start to look at the world through a different lens and do the work to understand what your operating system is and then how you function and how's that working for you. And then start to implement the changes when you come to those realizations. And that takes effort. It takes systems. It takes discipline. We talked many times about discipline and how much you need it. And so that's all part of the change and the resistance and why we change, why it's hard, why we say change is hard, because it can be, it's exciting. It can be, it's also difficult.
It is. And going back to the word responsibility, when change happens in the chaos and you enter the chaos and you try to then start to peel away the things that you can control and things you can't control. When you break down the word responsibility, it's not just about a heavy thing. It just means, what's your responsibility? Mm-hmm. How do you respond to these changes? Do you have the ability? I'm pretty good, but sometimes I'll redline and I have my responsibility. Doesn't mean I want to just throw my hands up and walk away, but my ability to respond to another level of stress without downloading or releasing some of it in a different way can really hit at the same time. So paying attention to your responsibility when you're going through change and say, okay, you know what? I think I've had enough change for now. But I'm going to just rest. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to have to sit amongst the boxes in my move and have a cup of tea without everything being put away. Because I know there's people that will not move on or have fun or relax until everything's done. And to me, that can be a delay tactic to really embrace and be aware of what some of the change is going to bring to you. Because if you need your environment exactly the same way everywhere you are before you step into your what's next, sometimes that can be a barrier to change.
Yeah. And, you said something and it brought up something is that, the other challenge that we face, especially if we're business owners, we're leaders in some way, we might have a team, intrapreneur, maybe we got partners. The challenge is that if you are that individual who is maybe a little bit more open to seeing the future and embracing what needs to be done to achieve a bigger goal, while everybody else is kind of in that comfort zone of just being in the TikTok and keeping things the same and not wanting to disrupt what they got going on in their life. And I don't want to work harder. I don't want to work more. I love what I do just the way it is. Don't change it because this really works for me. And you come in and you're the disruptor. That can be a lot of pressure. And, in conversations with some of the entrepreneurs I've worked with where they've got, multiple people that they are working with that aren't as open to doing it different than they've done it before. And because this is, in fact, it serves them. I can come in at 9, I can go home at 5 or whatever the story is. But ultimately, this income's pretty good. My lifestyle's pretty good. Why do you want to change it? This works. And maybe you're that person that looks into the future and goes, yeah, it works today. But when we look into the future in this industry or given what's going on economically, we have to start to shift the business model now. And these are things that are really happening in the world all of the time in business. And at that point, if you're the person that's trying to drive the change and you got 15 other people that aren't so open to it, then how do you get in behind the wheel of that bus and drive that bus and reposition everybody? That takes the effort. That's where the transition can be really, really difficult. But if you can kind of gamify it, make it an outcome, work through it, it's pretty satisfying on the other side. That becomes the challenge. And so there's a lot of reasons that we don't change at all. We don't change fast enough. We want it to be easier. We want it to be quicker. We don't want to go through the transition. We don't want to piss people off. We don't want to be judged. We don't want to be made wrong. And what if it's not quite right when we come out the other end? Maybe it was not exactly as great as we thought it would be. So there's a lot of things that mentally that's the mental gymnastics of going through that transition.
Well, I think just to kind of wrap it up with a bow, a lot of times it's the fear of the unknown is what stops me from wanting to change. And if you flip that and go, it's not that it's unknown. It's just that maybe you get to start again, or you get to be creative, or it doesn't have to be, the unknown doesn't have to be a scary thing. And what if you change and things are better?
Of course. So the phrase that we use a number of times is that your floor or your ceiling becomes your new floor. And when you think in those terms, you start to realize that what you're trying to do is hit that ceiling of limitations, go through it. That becomes the new floor. And then you do it again. Understanding that transition is hard. Go through the transition. Don't let the mindset and the psychology of the fear and the hard work stop you. Put in systems, create the environment, have the discipline, surround yourself with the right people, and forge ahead. That's all I got. Steffany, final words?
Just get supported. Get supported, get supported, get supported, and get supported in the areas that you're not strong in. And to me, that's the biggest thing when it comes to change is that I want to move forward, take my team with me if I can, but there's going to be some people that have to leave along the way so that it creates space for new people, new opportunities, and new outcomes. So that's all I got.
Okay, just do it. Thanks, Steffany.
That was fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.